the Section 11, withdrawal of bonded goods. So this Section 11 governs how raw materials or finished products leave the customs bonded warehouse or the CBW. A withdrawal can be for local consumption, for processing by a subcontractor, or for transfer to another CBW free zone. So first is withdrawal for domestic consumption, local sales. So the general prohibition and exemption. Withdrawals for local sales are generally not allowed as the primary purpose of CBWs is for export-oriented manufacturing for MCBWs or CCPWs. Next is condition for approval. An exemption is made but it requires the prior approval of the district collector and contingent upon the immediate payment of all corresponding duties and taxes. So the 30% threshold for manufacturing CBWs, MCBWs, and customs common bonded warehouses, CCBWs, the withdrawals for local sales is generally capped at 30% of the total volume of bonded raw materials transferred to the CBWs for the year. Exemption for threshold. This 30% limitation does not apply to private customs bonded warehouses, PCBWs, which are established to serve only the operator's own requirements. Second, we have the withdrawal for subcontracting. A CBW operator may be allowed to withdraw and subcontract the processing of bonded goods without payment of duties and or tax if they have insufficient operational facilities or lack time to meet an export commitment. So this is subject to the approval of the district collector and strict guidelines, including that the subcontractor must be duly accredited by the Bureau of Customs and that the finished materials and resulting wastes must be returned to the CBW for reconciliation. Third, we have the withdrawal for constructive exportation. So this involves the sale or transfer of bonded goods, raw materials, or finished products to a different entity without physically leaving the customs territory. So this is allowed when goods are sold to another CBW or to an enterprise located in a free zone like PEZA. This type of transfer is treated as constructive export and remains duty or tax-free, subject to the recipient's bonded or free zone status. Let's move on to Section 12, direct exportation of bonded goods. So Section 12 specifies the procedure for the final and proper disposition of bonded goods via their intended purpose. Exportation. This process is crucial for the liquidation and cancellation of the customs bond. So, number 1, goods declaration. For exportation, the CBW operator must file a goods declaration for exportation E-SAD through the BOC's electronic to mobile E2M system prior to the shipment's departure. So this formal declaration officially marks the end of the warehousing process for those specific goods. So second is mandatory final examination. After the ESAD is filed, the goods are subjected to a mandatory examination by customs personnel before leaving the CBW's premises. So this examination verifies the identity, quantity, and description of the finished goods against the records of the raw materials. used, ensuring that the finished products are indeed made from the duty or tax-free materials and are ready for export. Third is liquidation and bond cancellation. The successful exportation of the finished product is the key event that allows the CBW operator to liquidate the corresponding raw material entry. So, the operator is required to submit complete documents for the liquidation of the entry within a non-extendable period of 60 days from the date of the complete and full exportation of the finished goods. So, the liquidation process validates the utilization of the imported raw materials. A successful liquidation leads to the cancellation of the warehousing bonds for that particular import transaction, thereby relieving the operator of their liability for duties and taxes. And finally, let's move on to Section 18, Suspension and Closure of CBW. Now, we can relate this section to Customs Administrative Order CEO 1-2022 because it is highly relevant as it details the specific penalties including suspension and closure of the CBW that directly enforce the principles discussed under Section 18 of CBW regulations. Now, the explanation to this section is that this section outlines the power and process for the Bureau of Customs to temporarily or permanently stop a CBW from operating if it fails to comply with the rules. So, the suspension is a temporary stoppage of the CBW's operating privileges. The grounds usually imposed for minor violations or failure to settle customs obligations like duties, taxes, or fines. So this section has no bonded goods can be imported or accepted, and no withdrawals even for export or are allowed until the issue is resolved. The closure or revocation of license is that this is a permanent termination of the CBW's authority to operate. It is typically reserved for like serious offenses or repeated violations such as unauthorized withdrawal, diversion of bonded goods, like selling without paying taxes, or consistent failure to comply with administrative requirements. So, let's move on to the violations. Letter A, the don'ts for CBW's operators. So, common violations under the CMO include unauthorized withdrawal, diversion, selling or releasing bonded goods into the domestic market without proper clearance and payment of corresponding duties and taxes. This is considered smuggling, exceeding import limits, importing goods beyond the volume or volume, quantity, or kind authorized in the CBW's license. Failure to liquidate, not submitting the required documents on time to account for the utilization of the bonded raw materials, effectively leaving the duties, taxes unpaid. So, non-compliance with security, failure to install or maintain minimum security requirements like CCTVs, cameras, proper partitioning to secure the bonded goods against pilferage or fire. And Importing restricted regulated goods. Bringing in restricted or regulated goods without the necessary import authority or clearance from the concerned government agency. Now we have the second one, the B, penalties, the consequences. The penalties in CMO 03-2022 and related customs laws are strict and can be administrative or criminal. Fines and surcharges. Monetary penalties imposed for specific quantifiable violations, suspension, or revocation of license. As discussed in Section 18, this stops or permanently ends the CBW's operation. Seizure and forfeiture. The goods themselves can be confiscated by the government if they are legally imported or diverted. Criminal prosecution for serious violations like smuggling, the responsible individuals, CBW operators, officials, can face criminal charges. And last is the C, compliance, the must-dos. So effective compliance is the goal of the CMO and is the responsibility of the CBW operator. Adhere to the license. Only import and store the specific raw materials in the approved volumes as detailed in the authority to operate. So, inventory management. Maintain accurate real-time inventory records that are reconcilable with BOC records, often through an automated inventory management systems, AIMS. So, timely liquidation. Promptly file the liquidation report, the accounting of all bonded goods used or exported, and cancel the bond within the prescribed period, usually a year from importation. And security measures ensures the CBW facility is secure with working CCTV, proper storage area, and controlled access to prevent any unauthorized movement of bonded goods. So that's all for the content of the section 2, 10, 11, 12, and 18 of the CMO 03-2022. Thank you.